Welcome back to Thriving in His Calling. I want to start off with my testimony, and this will be part one of my testimony, and I believe there's going to be either 2, 3, or 4 parts, as I'm still writing it out and still trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to have in each episode. Let's log in. So I was raised in Texas. A lot of you do know that I was raised in Texas, and I was raised in a Christian household called Mennonite. As I mentioned in the previous episode for Halloween, I'm going to be speaking a lot about Mennonite, quite a bit. And if you know what Mennonite is, it's like a cult, like I mentioned. I did, however, look up the definition of Mennonite, and it says that it is a member of a Protestant Christian denomination. That's it. That is all that Google gave me for a definition. There were a few other ones, but they did not actually represent Mennonite very well, and so I won't get into that. However, it is very similar to Amish, and when you're born into Mennonite, it feels like a cult. Like you are stuck in there and you can't get out, and you have to do all of these certain things, and they're just not right. It's not how Christianity is supposed to feel and how Christianity is supposed to be. That's not what it's called to be. The definition doesn't say that Mennonite is a cult. However, being somebody who is raised in Mennonite, it definitely feels like a cult. Very, very much like a cult. Mennonite is very, very negative. They would tell you, for women, for instance, they could only wear skirts that were 2 inches below their knees. Let's say you wore a skirt that was 1 inch below your knee. They would tell you to your face that you're going to hell. Bluntly. Let's say you didn't show up to church one Sunday. Oh, you're going to hell. Let's say men wear shorts. Like if men wanted to go play basketball and wear shorts, because wearing jeans for playing basketball, I'm sorry, but it's hard to do that. And so for men, there's so many rules, and for women, there's also so many rules that you can and can't do. And Mennonite overall is just such a negative impact. I know for me, from a young age, it negatively impacted myself tremendously. And so when I was 4 years old, I lost my home to a fire while we were living in Texas. However, we were not in the home when it caught fire, luckily. We were on a trip, and we got a call from our neighbors saying, hey, your house is gone, and it's just all ash. And so we turned right around. We were on our way to Florida. We turned right around and came back to Texas. And we got there, and our house was ash. Our house was made of brick, so the outside was more fine, but the brick was very, very black. It wasn't really ashy, but because it was brick and on the inside was drywall, the drywall was on the floor because it was all black and ashy. There was no salvaging anything of that house. Maybe the brick if you really wanted to, but if I'm correct, we didn't even save the brick. We just took the whole house down. When we rebuilt. But in the kitchen, so I was raised in a Christian home, so we did definitely have Bibles in our living rooms, in our kitchen, in our bedrooms. We had them all over the house, really. And I remember when we walked into that kitchen, I remember walking onto that floor, and all I heard was like cracking, because there was glass all over the floor from the windows and from the ceiling and from the cabinet doors, and everything had glass on it. And so I remember walking into the kitchen, and all my feet would hear was cracking. And as I walked in the kitchen, I saw on the table there was a Bible. This is not that Bible. However, we still have that Bible. My mom still has that Bible to this day at her house in Canada. But that Bible was in that kitchen and was untouched. Even though there was no countertop, it was laying on the ground. However, Although everything was gone, everything was black and ashy. That entire house was gone. The floors, the walls, furniture, chairs, everything was gone. But that Bible was laying on the ground, untouched. Nothing had happened to it. There was no ashiest, nothing. It was just regular pages. And that was it. I remember at age 6, when I was 6 years old, my entire life, or not my entire life, up until when I was 6 years old, I was going to a different church. I was going to a Mennonite church, and a really hardcore school Mennonite church. And I remember at age 6 already, I was already telling my parents, hey, I don't like this. I don't like feeling negative all the time. I don't like being told that I'm going to hell constantly. I don't like it. I really don't. And so I knew at age 6 already that I didn't want to be judged, that I wanted to be going to a church where I wanted to go to church, not going to a church where I had to go because my parents made me, or I had to go because in order to be saved. That's not what I wanted. And I knew that's not what the Lord had planned for my life. And so at age 6, I left and I went to another church. And it was actually really close by. And so my parents would either drop me off some Sundays, or some Sundays my friends would pick me up and I would go with them and they'd drop me back off at home while my parents went to the other church. Eventually, though, my parents did join me at the church I was going to. However, they got a lot of backlash, as you could say, from the Mennonite church saying, oh, we recognize that you're not at church. Why not? You're going to hell if you're not going to our church. You have to come to church. It was so hard for my parents to want to be where their daughter was, but then also get so much backlash from the Mennonite community where they were saying how terrible people my parents were and my siblings and me, and saying how we were all going to hell and we were going to burn up there. So many different things that they said. And so my parents would flip-flop quite often between the Mennonite church and the church that I was going to. But for some time, they were at my church consistently. So when I was 8 years old, my little sister, I have 2 siblings. I have a brother named Diami. He is 3 years younger than me. And then I have a sister named Callie, who is 4 years younger than me. And I am the oldest out of both of them. And when I was 8 years old, so Callie would have been 4 and my brother Diami would have been 5. Callie has Down syndrome and was born with it. She got really, really sick when she was 4, really sick. And so I remember this one summer, I forget what summer it was of what year, but I remember I was 8 and she was 4. It was the summer, we were having a great time. And, it was time for back to school shopping the weekend before school started, because that's when we school shopped, was the weekend before school would start. And so, I'm smiling now, but this is a very horrible situation that happened, but it happened. We were shopping at Walmart. And, we all wore dresses. And Callie, she loved her dresses because, that's how we were raised, with Mennonite. And we'd wear dresses. And I remember being at Walmart. And not even that, just a couple of days prior, Callie had started getting these bruises on her legs. And they were purple, red, black, green, every color the bruise could be. They were dark, though. They were not light bruises. They were dark. And she started getting them all over her legs. They started slowly, but they got completely from her entire leg down, front, back, side, everywhere. She had those bruises all over. And then to a point, prior to that weekend, our parents asked us, are you hitting Callie? Because they knew we were a little envious of Callie because she got so much attention from her parents and we got nothing. And I understand, with a child with Down syndrome and, now leading into the life of where she gets diagnosed with something terrible, It's hard. It's hard. However, my parents were not hitting her, and neither were me and my brother, and neither was anyone else in her life because we didn't. She wasn't in school at the time yet because she just wasn't ready for it. And so we all talked, and none of us were doing anything. Finally, it was the Saturday before school started on Tuesday. So Tuesday school started. That's previous Saturday is when we were in Walmart and we were school shopping, back to school shopping. And I remember my sister being in the cart and me and my brother being beside my mom as we go and grab our things. And obviously Callie is sitting with her legs stretched out, and she's sitting in the cart, and you notice a lot of people are noticing, like they're walking by and they're doing this and they're just doing this and walking by. And you see it. People are thinking that we're hitting her or we're doing something to her, and we weren't. We honest to God, we're not doing anything to her. Neither were my parents. And it got so bad that by that Saturday, the bruises were joining. Like they were starting, like her whole legs were almost purple and blue. And it wasn't right. And at that point, after we were done school shopping, because we were in town and we lived outside of town, my mom thought, you know what? I'm taking her to the ER. We need to take her to the ER. And so my mom took her to the ER. We all went to the ER. So my mom was there, me and my brother were there, and Callie was there. And so we come into the ER, we sit in the waiting room, and my mom goes in to the triage. We all go into triage, and they check Callie out really quick. We come back out of triage, go back in the waiting room, and not long after, it was a waiting room full of people. But I remember not long after, maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, we're in the back already. They're drawing labs on Callie. They're doing ultrasounds. They're running every test in the book. And I remember being in that room with my mom and my sister and my brother and me. We were all in that room, in the room in the back. And we were all sitting there, and we were kind of just playing. And all of a sudden, a nurse walks in, and she asked my mom a question, and she asked if she can take me and my brother out of the room, and just to go color. It was just to get us out of the room, so if my mom wanted to cry, she could. And I think she did. I don't know to this day. However, the nurse took me and my brother out of the room. We went and did some coloring and some games and just went and played so that we were out of the way. And the doctor came in and told my mom that Callie had stage 4 leukemia, ALL blood cancer, and that she had to leave right away. She had to leave me and my brother there, and she had to get to the top of the not the hotel, to the top of the hospital, and get in the airplane and get to Dallas, to a hospital that is equipped to take care of Callie and to take care of her now, because if not, she's going to die. And so they took her up. Me and my brother stayed down there in the ER while my mom and my sister went up to the top floor. And I think there was only about 6 floors in that hospital, if I'm correct. It was a very small hospital. And took them to Dallas. However, my mom obviously did call my dad right as all of this was happening. And my dad left work and came and got us right away. He was about 30 minutes away, but me and my brother, we stayed there, and we just stayed with the nurse, and we colored and played, and that's what we did. And it was amazing. And we didn't know what was going on. We knew nothing because no one told us anything. We started asking for my mom, and they just said that she was still in the back room, but she was not. You know, she had already gone in the helicopter, and she was gone with Callie. And so my dad came to pick us up, and we went home, and we knew nothing. We didn't know anything. We just thought, okay, you know, things are taking longer with Callie in the hospital, and which was usual. That it was a usual thing. And so me and my brother thought, you know, nothing of it. My dad took us home, had a normal dinner. We asked where Mom and Callie were. Oh, they're still at the hospital. And it was normal for Callie to be hospitalized for a day or two at a time. But after some time, we started asking, and, you know, Mom and Callie didn't come home. They stayed in Dallas for quite a long time. I don't know the exact time. I wish, but I don't know the exact time. I really hope that you do get to meet Callie at some point in your life. For those of you who have met Callie, know what ray of sunshine this little girl is. She is the most lovable, sweetest little human being ever. She is very small. She is very tiny, but she is catching up in height. And to this day, she is 18 years old. She just turned an adult. She just turned 18. She's an adult now, which was never possible in the doctor's eyes, ever. Every doctor we saw, it was never possible. And I just hope one day that you get to meet this ray of sunshine, because she truly is a shining light of Jesus, 1000%. This was just the first month of Callie being gone in Dallas. It was about, I would say, roughly a month. It was a good amount of time. You might be asking why I bring Callie up and why I talk about her so much. Because not only did this drastically impact her life, but mine as well. And especially my parents, my entire family, honestly. But it drastically impacted my life. And Callie is the reason why I do what I do. I would not be doing what I do if it wasn't for Callie. Truly, truly, I believe that. Callie also is the reason why the impossible is possible. And it's shown over and over and over again in her life. Countless amounts of times. The doctors at that children's hospital in Dallas, when Callie got there, had to make an aggressive plan, and they had to do it really quickly. And they presented it to my mother right away with my dad on the phone because, he wasn't there. He wasn't able to. Somebody had to be with the kids. And luckily, we lived on a compound. So our house here, grandparents right next door. It takes about 20 steps for me to get to my grandparents' house, roughly, maybe 30. So it was very convenient that my grandparents lived next door, and Dallas was about a 2-hour. The hospital that Callie was at least at was roughly 2 to 2.5 hours from our house one way. So roughly 4 to 5 hours, depending on the day, round trip. And so the doctors agreed on radiation and chemo, and so did my parents. And so Callie profusely went through that. She had countless amounts of surgeries. I don't even remember all the surgeries that she had. However, I do remember there were various many surgeries. And each one, we never knew if she would make it out. The survival rate currently to this day, like today being, it is a 28% survival rate for the type of cancer that Callie had, and as well as with being Down syndrome on top of it. But at the time when Callie did get diagnosed, there was only a 5 to 12% survival rate. That was it. Over the next full year of my life, I only saw Callie on the weekends because she was hospitalized in Dallas. There would be times where her levels would be really good, and she'd come home for about 1, 2, maybe 3 days. But because my brother were in school, and at the time it was a public school that I was going to, we were going to school. We're bringing germs home. We didn't have play dates as kids because it was too compromising for Callie. So we really didn't bring anyone into the house, and we really didn't go out of the house for that reason being. And so, every time that we bring a sickness home, let's say it was flu season, especially during flu season, Callie was never home. She maybe come home for 1 or 2 days and then back to Dallas because her platelets would drop or any of her levels or something would drop, and she had to go back to Dallas. And it was really hard. So over the next year, I only saw Callie on the weekends because we'd be in school. So on the weekends, my dad would pick us up from school because he'd be trucking throughout the week, and we'd be at home during the week, and we had a nanny with us, or my grandparents next door would look in on us. And so on the weekends, we'd stay at the Ronald McDonald House, if you know who they are. I dedicate a lot of my time now in my life to Ronald McDonald and Make-A-Wish because they are a very, very big, important part of, who I am and who I grew up as and how I grew up is thanks to Make-A-Wish and to Ronald McDonald because they made life sustainable in the times of where we didn't know if we'd ever see our sister again. Me and my brother never knew if we'd see Callie again. My parents didn't know if we'd ever see Callie again. But Make-A-Wish and Ronald McDonald did their best to give us a place to stay, give us things to take our mind off of what was going on, and to just have a listening ear. They were absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Every time I came to the hospital on the weekends, or even when Callie came home, Callie was so happy. She was always, always smiling. This girl, it was very rare that you would catch her without a smile on her face. And even to this day, it is very, very rare that you will catch her without a smile on her face. Unless she is now she's at a time in her life currently where she is very focused. She's learning to focus. And so when she is focused, she doesn't smile because she's very focused on one thing and she likes to keep her eyes directly on that thing and not on anything else, which is exactly why things are a little bit different. However, I've posted of her many times when I'll FaceTime her and it is just a big smile or laughing or anything bright. That girl, she is the brightest little girl I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm so fortunate that the Lord handpicked me to not only be a sister over her, but to be a guardian. Truly, truly, she is the sweetest little thing ever. There is a picture that I have. I have 2 pictures of when she was being pumped full of radiation and chemo, of her sitting in a hospital bed in a red dress and just sitting there smiling. And at some point this week, I'm going to post those pictures and those videos because I think they're definitely meant to be shared. Unfortunately, this leads to my next part in my podcast. Just a little bit after that year, Callie had to go to the 11th floor. So the way that hospital worked, and the way that most hospital works, is that, ER is on the bottom, and then you have your floors of how bad it is, and then morgue on top. And so Callie got put to the 11th floor. Callie was intubated. She was out. She wasn't Callie. We didn't know where the tubes began and ended and where Callie began and ended. We didn't know because that's how I have a lot of pictures and I have posted some of them over the years, but there are some very severe pictures that I have that she was just covered in wires and you didn't know where Callie was because there was just so many wires and so many tubes and so many things being pumped into her and pumped out of her, and there was a lot. There was a lot. And it was hard to see with me only being 9 or 10 at the time, if I'm correct. And so I remember the one weekend we came to Dallas. And it was exactly when we got there. They wanted my dad to come up right away and us to come up right away. So we came up, got into the ICU. We got up there. And I remember this day very vividly because I'd never seen my dad cry in my entire life until this day. And my mother was just sitting there bawling. And I remember walking into the room and everyone was okay because we had just gotten there. Everyone was okay. Callie was still asleep just like normal. She had been asleep for quite some time because she was in a coma. She was out. She wasn't Callie because she couldn't talk or play or smile or anything. And I remember the doctor coming in and a nurse coming in and the nurse taking us out again. She took me and my brother. We went and played some video games and drew and colored and painted and all the fun stuff. Well, my parents stayed in the room, and so we knew it was another serious conversation. At least I knew. I don't know if my brother knew, but I knew that there's something was going on, and they didn't want us knowing. And so a little bit later, we came back in the room trying to figure out what was going on. And I saw my parents just crying, and I didn't know what was going on. I really did not understand. And so the doctor was kind enough to explain it to me. And he said that, Callie was not doing well. And that right now would be the best time to say goodbye. And that there was basically no chance that she was going to live to the next morning. That she had a 5% survival rate to still be alive tomorrow morning, the next morning. And it tears me down every time I talk about this, but she is genuinely the sweetest girl ever. And at the time, I didn't see that. At the time, I was just envious that she was getting the attention she was getting. And it's hard. It was definitely hard, I have to say. My parents, however, spoke very little English because I am raised in a German household where we spoke German and Spanish. And I didn't learn English till I was in kindergarten and I went to school. And so there was this 2-page prayer in the ICU that was going around the ICU. And they were just kind of sending it from room to room and giving it out. And it was a very long prayer. It was 2 pages. And so my parents couldn't read it, but they knew that it was a prayer. And the people, I guess the next door people in the ICU heard what was going on with Callie. And they came in and they gave us this 2-page prayer and said, hey, like my dad could understand English quite well and he could speak it quite well. My mother could very barely understand English, like just enough to get around and enough medical terms for Callie. And that was it. But she could not speak it. And so the 2-page prayer was going around the ICU. And somehow it made its way that day, that evening, to our room. And so my mom didn't speak much English. So she gave it to me because she knew I did. My brother didn't speak that much English either, but he was still learning because he was just getting into kindergarten. So he was learning English. But I knew English very well. I knew how to read it, write it, speaking it now. And so my mom told me, she's like, Diana, pray this over and over. Let's pray that Callie gets healed. And so we went back to the Ronald McDonald House that night because that's where we were staying. And so we went there. And I remember that night, I remember my mom turning off the lights and I was still praying over and over. And I almost memorized it to a point. And we still have this prayer. We still have this prayer in Callie's keepsake back in Canada. And I remember just praying it over and over and over all night to a point where I had to go in the bathroom to get light because I couldn't see it. But I started memorizing it slowly. And I remember it was being around 3 or 4 in the morning is when I finally fell asleep on the bathroom floor because I was praying it over and over and over. I was doing exactly what my mother asked of me. And so the next morning, we came back to the hospital, which it was a walking distance. It was next door pretty much. Went back to the hospital, expecting that, we were going to go and bring Callie to the morgue, which is on the 12th floor. And Callie's on the 11th, so once you get to the 12th, it's the morgue. We expected to come back and go to the morgue. So we went to the morgue first, and Callie wasn't there. Went to the 11th floor where Callie was in the ICU, right? Went there. Callie was not there either. So we're like, okay, where's Callie? Because this makes no sense. She was supposed to be in the morgue. She was also supposed to be in the 11th floor. We started asking the nurses and they checked and they're like, oh no. Callie's awake. She's on the 6th floor. She's talking. She's been asking for you. We we run down the hallway to the elevator, down to the 6th floor. And then we're at the 6th floor asking those nurses, where's Callie? We get to her room. And this girl, no tubes, no nothing. She's awake. She's talking. She's not walking because she had to relearn that. But she was talking. And she was so excited to see us. My mom, me, my brother, we ran in. And she was so excited. So excited to see us. And we couldn't believe what we were seeing. We didn't get it. We didn't believe it. How is this possible? And so we know she was awake. She was awake. And it still blows my mind to this day. And it just shows that we serve a God of impossibles that can do the impossibles. What all the doctors and second opinions said was impossible became possible. I truly believe the Lord has handpicked where he places his Down syndrome children. And I'm very, very, very glad and fortunate that the Lord handpicked me and my family to have Callie with us. Callie is the reason I do what I do. And that is where I truly decided to follow Jesus. Even though I was raised in a Christian household, and even though I was raised in a biblically sound household, it was raised more in a Mennonite household where it was rule driven. And that was hard. That was really hard. However, at that point, I believe I was roughly 11 years old at this point, is where I fully decided to follow Jesus. And that is where I'm going to end today's episode. Thank you all for listening and have a blessed week. I will see you next week.